My husband mocked me for not having a real job and treated me like a burden, so I built my own empire in secret. When he lost everything and came begging for help, I watched him crumble, just like he wanted me to. I stood frozen in the doorway, my breath caught in my throat, my fingers tightening around the steaming cup of tea I had just prepared for him. The warmth of the ceramic burned against my palms, but I couldn't feel it, not really. Not when my entire world was shattering before me. I mean, come on, she doesn't even have a real job. My husband's voice rang through the living room, casual, dismissive, laced with quiet laughter. A ripple of amusement followed. His friends, our friends, laughed along with him. I should have stepped back, left the room before I heard any more. But my feet refused to move. My heartbeat drummed in my ears, drowning out the rest of the conversation until all I could hear was my own breath, shaky and uneven. She just stays at home all day, scribbling in that little notebook of hers like it means something, he continued, completely unaware that I was standing behind him. I bust my back working, making sure the bills are paid, while she plays house and pretends to be a writer. More laughter. I felt the air leave my lungs, my grip loosening on the cup. It slipped from my fingers, crashing against the hardwood floor with a sharp shatter. The laughter stopped. A deep, heavy silence filled the room as every pair of eyes turned toward me. My husband's expression flickered, surprise, guilt, irritation. But it lasted only a second before he sighed, rubbing his temples as if I were the one embarrassing him. "Look, don't be so dramatic," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's just a joke." A joke. 7 years of my life. 7 years of standing beside him, supporting him, loving him with every fiber of my being. 7 years of cooking his favorite meals, ironing his shirts, holding him when he was stressed, believing in him when he doubted himself. 7 years of being his wife. And to him I was nothing more than a woman who played house. A woman without a real job. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, bending down to clean the shards of broken ceramic. My hands trembled as I picked up the larger pieces, my mind replaying his words over and over again. He didn't even try to stop me. Not once did he apologize, not once did he move to help me. He simply returned to his conversation, brushing off the moment as if it didn't matter. As if I didn't matter. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence between us heavier than ever. My husband had fallen asleep easily, like a man with nothing on his conscience. I turned onto my side, watching the rise and fall of his chest, wondering how long he had felt this way. Had he always thought so little of me? Or had it happened slowly, bit by bit, until I had become just another fixture in his life, unimportant, replaceable? A single tear slid down my cheek and I quickly wiped it away. I would not cry over this. I would not let his words break me. But deep down something had cracked. Something I wasn't sure could ever be mended. The next morning I forced myself to act normal, pretending his words hadn't lodged themselves deep into my chest like a dagger. I went about my usual routine, making breakfast, tidying up, ensuring everything was perfect before he left for work. I handed him his coffee and he barely looked at me as he took it. Thanks. No remorse. No acknowledgement of last night. As if nothing had happened at all. I should have confronted him. Should have asked him why he said those things, why he laughed at me like I was nothing. But the words never came. Because deep down I already knew the answer. He didn't respect me. And maybe he never had. Days passed, then weeks, and I tried to push the thought away to convince myself that he was just stressed, that he didn't mean it. But once you hear the truth you can never unhear it. The way he spoke to me changed subtly at first. Less patience, less warmth. He started staying out later, his phone always turned away from me. The little things, the good morning kisses, the playful teasing, the casual touches, disappeared one by one like autumn leaves falling from a tree. Until one evening when I reached for his hand at dinner, and he pulled away like my touch was an inconvenience. That's when I knew. Something was wrong. But I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. One evening I sat alone in my small writing space, my fingers tracing the edges of my old leather notebook. Writing had always been my escape, my way of making sense of the world. But I had set it aside after our wedding, pouring all of my energy into our marriage, into him. What was the point of chasing dreams when you already had everything you ever wanted? Only now I realized I had lost myself along the way. With a deep breath I opened the notebook, flipping through the empty pages. And then for the first time in years, I wrote. Not about love. Not about happiness. I wrote about pain. I wrote about a woman who gave everything only to be belittled, discarded. A woman who loved a man who saw her as nothing more than a shadow in his life. I wrote until my hands ached, until the words blurred together, until the weight in my chest started to lift. I didn't know it then, but that night would change everything. Because while my husband was slowly pulling away, I was finding something far more powerful than his love. I was finding myself. And soon he would realize he was losing the one thing he never thought he needed. The glow of my laptop screen was the only source of light in the dimly lit room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my mind a swirling storm of emotions. I had spent hours writing, pouring every ounce of my pain into words, shaping the story of a woman who gave too much and received nothing in return. But reality was far worse than fiction. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. He was late again. The past few weeks had been a slow descent into something I couldn't quite name. At first, it was little things. The way he answered my questions with half-hearted nods, the way he barely looked at me when he spoke. But then it grew. Late nights. Unanswered calls. The absence of the man I once knew replaced by someone distant, uninterested. I heard the front door creak open, followed by the soft clatter of keys on the table. My breath hitched, my heart clinging to the foolish hope that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe he would come in, wrap his arms around me and tell me he missed me. Maybe he would see me. I closed my laptop and stepped into the hallway just as he shrugged off his coat. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, the scent of expensive cologne clinging to his skin. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. He barely glanced at me. "Hey." That was it. No warmth. No explanation for why he was home so late. I swallowed, my hands gripping the edge of my sweater. "Dinner's in the kitchen. I made your favorite." His fingers brushed against his forehead in frustration. "I already ate." My smile faltered. "Oh." The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. He didn't even bother making an excuse. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hours I had spent preparing a meal for him. I searched his face, hoping to find some trace of the man I had married. But all I saw was indifference. "Okay," I whispered, stepping back. "I'll just put it away." He didn't respond. He simply walked past me, heading straight to the bedroom, leaving me standing there, alone. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. He came home late, stayed glued to his phone, avoided conversations. When we did talk, his responses were clipped, as if I was an obligation he had to tolerate. One evening I tried to bridge the distance. I waited for him to return, wearing the dress he once loved, the one he used to say made me look like a dream. I set up a quiet dinner, candles flickering against the dim light, hoping, praying, that maybe this would remind him of us. He walked in, barely sparing a glance. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice flat. I swallowed my pride, my fingers twisting together. "I thought we could have dinner together. Just us." Pause. Then a sigh. "I have work to do." I bit my lip, willing my tears to stay put. "It's just one meal." His jaw tightened. "I'm tired." I stood there, staring at the man who once swore he would never let me feel alone. "Are you tired?" I asked softly. "Or are you tired of me?" His eyes flicked up to meet mine. For a moment something flashed in them. Guilt, maybe. But then just as quickly it was gone. "Don't start," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I just want some peace." "Peace?" I nodded slowly, my chest tightening. "Of course." Without another word, he disappeared into his office, closing the door behind him. I stood in the quiet, the candles flickering before me, casting long, lonely shadows against the walls. I realized then that I wasn't just losing him. I had already lost him. The days blurred together, each one colder than the last. I stopped trying. Stopped waiting for him to come home early. Stopped preparing his favorite meals. Stopped hoping he would notice the way I kept shrinking into myself. I focused on my writing instead. It was the only thing that didn't turn away from me, the only thing that made me feel like I still existed. One night, I sat on the couch, my laptop balanced on my knees, when he finally spoke to me. "Are you still wasting time on that?" I looked up, my stomach twisting. "On what?" He gestured toward my laptop. "You're writing." I blinked, my fingers curling against the keyboard. "It's not a waste of time." He scoffed. "Right. Because scribbling in a notebook all day is really productive. I stared at him, feeling something inside me snap. You used to support me. He let out a short, humorless laugh. I used to believe you had potential. But let's be honest, you're never going to make anything out of it. The words cut deeper than I expected. I had spent years believing in him, supporting him, lifting him up when he doubted himself. And he had reduced my dreams to nothing. I set my laptop aside, my voice quiet but firm. You don't have to believe in me. He rolled his eyes. Great. Glad we're on the same page. He turned away, dismissing me, the conversation already forgotten in his mind. But in that moment something shifted inside me. I didn't need his belief. I didn't need his approval. I just needed to prove him wrong. The loneliness should have crushed me. But instead it fueled me. I wrote with a fire I hadn't felt in years, pouring every emotion into my words. I created a story of a woman who had given everything, only to be discarded when she was no longer useful. A woman who, despite the pain, rose from the ashes. The story wasn't just fiction. It was my truth. Every night while he ignored me, I built something. Something he didn't even know existed. And one day he would see it. One day he would realize that the woman he had pushed aside was never weak. She was just waiting for her moment. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped waiting for him. Maybe it was the night I set the dinner table for two, only to clear it an hour later when his seat remained empty. Or maybe it was the morning I woke up and realized he hadn't kissed me goodbye in months. But I do remember the moment I knew with absolute certainty, that I was no longer enough for him. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, just another day in the slow unraveling of our marriage. I had been working on my manuscript for hours, lost in the words, my fingers moving across the keyboard as if they had a mind of their own. It was the only thing that still felt real to me, the only thing that gave me a sense of purpose. Then my phone buzzed. A message from him. Dinner at the Monarch tonight. Don't wait up. I frowned. The Monarch was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. We had gone there once for our anniversary. It had been the kind of night I thought would last forever. Soft candlelight, stolen glances, fingers intertwined beneath the table. Back when he still saw me. I hesitated, then typed back. Who are you going with? 3 dots appeared on the screen. Then they vanished. No response. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something I couldn't quite name settle deep in my stomach. I wanted to believe it was just business. That he was meeting a client, networking, doing whatever it was that kept him so busy these days. But deep down I already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled in a mess of doubt and denial. The clock ticked on, each second dragging into eternity. And then I heard it. The front door clicking open. I sat up, my pulse quickening as I listened to the familiar sound of his footsteps. But there was something different this time. A hesitation in the way he moved. I climbed out of bed and stepped into the hallway just as he shrugged off his coat. He looked up, startled to see me awake. You're still up. I folded my arms. You didn't answer my text. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was busy. With who? His jaw tightened. Why does it matter? I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. Because I'm your wife. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he let out a soft, humorless laugh. Right. That single word hit harder than any insult ever could. Right. As if I was nothing more than an afterthought. As if I was foolish to even ask. I stared at him, searching his face for something, guilt, regret, anything. But all I saw was indifference. He wasn't even trying to lie. And that was the moment. The moment I knew with painful clarity that I had lost him. I didn't confront him after that. What was the point? Said I observed. I noticed the way he always kept his phone face down, how he became irritated when I asked about his schedule, how his patience with me had worn so thin it barely existed at all. But the worst part? I noticed how little it hurt. I had already grieved the love we had lost. Now I was just waiting for the inevitable. One evening I stood by the bedroom window watching the city lights flicker in the distance, when I heard his voice from the other room. Pause. A voice he never used with me anymore. I stepped closer, pressing my palm against the cool wooden surface of the door. I can't talk right now, he whispered. She's here. Pause. Then a soft chuckle. Yeah, I know. Soon. A sharp, bitter taste filled my mouth. I stepped away, swallowing the nausea that rose in my throat. I could have burst through the door, demanded answers, screamed and cried and asked him why. But I didn't. Because I already knew. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. The days stretched into weeks, each one heavier than the last. We barely spoke. We shared the same space but lived in different worlds. I no longer cooked his meals. No longer waited for him to come home. No longer cared if he spent his nights with someone else. Said I wrote. Every moment of neglect, every quiet betrayal, every silent wound, I poured it all onto the page. It was the only thing keeping me sane. One night as I sat at my desk, my fingers aching from hours of typing, I heard him call my name. For a second I hesitated. Then I turned. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a look of quiet frustration on his face. You're always on that laptop. I raised an eyebrow. And you're always out. A flicker of annoyance crossed his features. So this is what we've become? I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. No. This is what you turned us into. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He just sighed, running a hand down his face. I think we need some time apart. I stared at him, my chest tightening. So this was it. The moment he finally said it out loud. I waited for the pain to come. The heartbreak. The devastation. But there was nothing. No tears. No pleading. No desperate attempts to fix what had already shattered. I just nodded. Okay. His eyebrows furrowed slightly as if my calmness had caught him off guard. He had expected resistance. Expected me to fight for him. But I had already fought for him. For 7 years I had given him everything. And in return he had given me nothing. So I wasn't going to fight anymore. I was going to let him go. And one day he would realize he had lost something far more valuable than he ever knew. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my own reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person I used to be. She had the same face, the same eyes, the same features. But there was something different now. A quiet emptiness behind her gaze. An exhaustion that went deeper than sleepless nights. I had spent years being his wife, his support, his constant. And now I was nothing more than a shadow in his life. The house was too quiet that morning. Too still. It had been 3 days since he told me we needed time apart. 3 days of moving around in silence, avoiding conversations, avoiding him. But something was different today. A strange energy filled the air, an unspoken tension thick enough to suffocate me. Then I heard the sound of a suitcase being dragged across the floor. My chest tightened. I turned away from the mirror and walked into the hallway. And there he was. Standing by the door, his suitcase packed, his coat neatly folded over his arm. He wasn't just leaving for a few days. He was leaving for good. I felt my heart drop to my stomach. You're really doing this? He exhaled through his nose, shifting the weight of his suitcase. I think it's for the best. Best for who? Certainly not for me. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. Is there someone else? His jaw tightened, his eyes darting away. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but I caught it. I knew the answer before he even spoke. There's no point in dragging this out, he muttered. A confession without actually saying the words. He wasn't leaving to find someone new. He already had her. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place and my stomach twisted with nausea. I had spent months, years telling myself I was imagining things, that I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. It had been her all along. I took a slow step back, gripping the wall for support. How long? He let out a long breath, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Does it really matter? I let out a short, humorless laugh. It does to me. He hesitated. A while. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of loving him, trusting him, believing in him, and he had thrown it all away for someone else. I forced myself to stand tall, to hold on to the last shred of dignity I had left. Is she worth it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time in months I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt. But guilt wasn't love. And guilt wouldn't change the fact that he had already made his choice. I hope so, he said, voice quiet. He hoped so. I nodded slowly, pressing my lips together to stop them from trembling. And then just like that he turned and walked out the door. No final words. No apologies. No last-minute hesitation. Just gone. The house felt different without him. Lighter somehow. I expected to fall apart, to crumble under the weight of my grief, to sob until my lungs gave out. But I didn't. Instead, I stood in the doorway staring at the empty space where he had been, and felt something else entirely. Relief. I didn't have to wait up anymore. Didn't have to wonder where he was or who he was with. Didn't have to beg for scraps of his attention. He was gone. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. Days passed. Then weeks. People started whispering. His friends, our friends, acted awkward around me, offering forced smiles and sympathetic nods whenever I passed by. And then the news broke. I saw it first on social media. A tagged photo, a candid shot taken at an upscale event. There he was. Smiling. Carefree. And beside him, her. Younger. Prettier. Dressed in designer clothes that cost more than my entire wardrobe combined. The caption beneath the photo made my stomach churn. The city's most powerful couple. Unstoppable together. Unstoppable. Like I had never even existed. Like the past 7 years had been nothing more than a forgotten chapter in his life. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I refused to cry over this. Over him. I shut my laptop and stood up, my hands trembling. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was humiliation. And I wasn't going to let it destroy me. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen. My manuscript was unfinished, sitting in drafts, waiting for an ending I hadn't been able to write. But now I knew how the story would end. Not with heartbreak. Not with a woman left shattered by a man who never deserved her love. But with a woman who rose from it. I started typing. Faster. Sharper. Stronger. I wrote about a woman who had given everything, only to be discarded when she was no longer useful. A woman who was told she wasn't enough, only to prove everyone wrong. A woman who wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The words poured out of me raw and unfiltered. And for the first time in a long time I felt free. Weeks later, I walked into a cafe and overheard a conversation at the table beside me. "She's incredible," one woman said, scrolling through her phone. "Have you read her book? It's like she took every woman's worst nightmare and turned it into a victory story." "I heard it's based on real life," her friend replied. "People are saying the husband in the book is actually her ex." A slow smile formed on my lips. They had no idea the woman they were talking about was sitting just a few feet away. I sipped my coffee, listening to them gush over my work, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in him. Not in our failed marriage. But in myself. I had taken the pain he left me with and turned it into something powerful. Something unstoppable. And for the first time since he walked out that door, I was glad he did. I sat in the cafe for a long time after the two women left, my fingers wrapped around my coffee cup, the warmth grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. They had been talking about me. About my book. About my story. 4 years I had been invisible. Just a wife, just an accessory to someone else's success. Now people were reading my words, feeling my pain, celebrating my victory. And the best part? They had no idea I was sitting right there. I took a slow sip, letting the moment settle inside me. This was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to turn it into something powerful. And I wasn't done yet. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My inbox was flooded with emails. From publishers, from readers, from women who saw themselves in my story. Some were messages of gratitude, others of heartbreak, but all of them had the same undertone. "Thank you for writing this." One email stood out. Subject: TV interview request. I clicked it open, my pulse quickening. A major talk show wanted me to come on and discuss my book. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. For so long I had let myself shrink. I had let him define my worth. Now the world was asking me to step forward, to tell my story not just on paper but in my own voice. I thought of him. What would he think if he saw me now? Would he regret leaving? Would he even care? It didn't matter. Because this wasn't about him anymore. The night of the interview, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the lapels of my tailored blazer. I looked different. Not because of the expensive outfit or the flawless makeup, but because of the woman staring back at me. She was confident. Taken. She knew her worth now. When I arrived at the studio, I was ushered into a green room where a producer briefed me on the segment. My book had touched so many lives, she said. They wanted to dive into its impact, into my journey. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. But inside, a storm raged. This was the moment I had waited for. Not revenge. Not validation from him. But recognition. When the cameras rolled, the host smiled warmly at me. "You wrote one of the most talked about books of the year," she said. "And many people believe it's based on your real-life experience." I returned her smile. "People say a lot of things." The audience chuckled. The host leaned forward. "But there's one thing no one can deny. You turned pain into power. Can you tell us what that journey was like?" I took a deep breath. And then I told them. I spoke of the love I had given, the sacrifices I had made. I spoke of the slow unraveling, the moment I realized I was no longer enough for the man I had devoted my life to. I didn't mention his name. I didn't have to. The people who needed to know already knew. And that was enough. After the interview aired, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Old friends reached out. Publishers offered new book deals. My social media following exploded overnight. And then late one evening another message came through. From him. I stared at his name on the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It had been months since I last saw him. Since the day he walked out with his suitcase, thinking he was trading me in for a shinier version of happiness. Now he was reaching out. Curiosity flickered inside me. I clicked the message open. "Hey, we should talk." I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders. What did he expect? That I would leap at the opportunity to hear his excuses? That I would still be waiting, hoping for an apology? I wasn't that woman anymore. I was curious. So, against my better judgment, I replied. "About what?" His response came almost instantly. "Can we meet? Please." I agreed, but not because I wanted closure. I had already found that on my own. I met him at a quiet restaurant. The same place where years ago he had once taken my hand and told me he would love me forever. How ironic. When I walked in, he was already seated at a corner table. And for the first time since the divorce, I really looked at him. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The man who once commanded rooms now seemed like he was trying not to be noticed. His expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders, the lines of exhaustion on his face. I sat across from him, folding my hands neatly on the table. "You wanted to talk." He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I saw your interview. Good for you." He winced at my tone but didn't argue. "I didn't realize," he trailed off, shaking his head. "You really wrote our story." "No," I corrected. "I wrote my story. You were just in it." He looked down, running a hand through his hair. "I messed up." I let out a short laugh. "That's an understatement." Pause. "Then, I regret it." I tilted my head. "Do you regret leaving?" I asked, my voice steady. "Or do you regret that I didn't fall apart without you?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. And just like that I knew. He didn't regret the choices he had made. He regretted that I had thrived without him. I stood, smoothing out my blazer. "Thank you," I said. His brow furrowed. "For what?" "For finally showing me who you really were," I said simply. "If you hadn't, I might have spent my whole life waiting for you to love me the way I deserved." I turned to leave. He didn't stop me. Because he knew, just like I did, that this time I was the one walking away. And I wasn't looking back. I stepped out of the restaurant, the evening air crisp against my skin, a stark contrast to the heated conversation I had just left behind. The city lights shimmered around me, but I felt lighter than ever before. There was no weight on my chest, no lingering bitterness. Just a quiet, undeniable truth. I had won. Not in the way people think of victory, not with loud revenge or dramatic confrontations, but in the simplest, most powerful way. I had set myself free. As I walked towards my car, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my notifications. The interview had gone viral. Clips of me speaking about my book were being shared all over social media. People were dissecting every word, drawing connections, speculating on the truth behind the fiction. And my book sales? They had skyrocketed overnight. For a moment I just stared at the numbers. The realization hit me like a slow rolling wave. This wasn't just a book anymore. It was a movement. The next few weeks felt surreal. Emails flooded my inbox. Publishers wanting another book, film studios expressing interest in adapting my story, women sharing their own experiences, thanking me for putting their pain into words. I read every single message. One woman wrote, "I felt like I was losing my mind, thinking I wasn't enough for my husband. Your book showed me that it wasn't me, it was him." Thank you. Another confessed. I walked away after reading your story. I realized I didn't have to wait for someone to see my worth. I could just decide that I was already enough. I sat at my desk, overwhelmed, my chest tight with emotions I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, pride, and something deeper, purpose. For so long, I had believed my worth was tied to being a good wife, to making someone else happy. But now my worth was in my voice, in the stories I told. And I wasn't going to stop. The first time I saw my book in a bookstore, I stood there for a long time just staring. It was displayed front and center, right by the entrance. A staff recommendation sign was placed beneath it. A must-read for every woman who has ever doubted her strength. I ran my fingers over the glossy cover, tracing the title, my name embossed in bold letters. Once I had dreamed of this moment. But back then I had imagined sharing it with him, looking over at him for approval, for reassurance. Now I stood alone. And it was perfect. A woman next to me picked up the book and flipped through the pages. I smiled, watching as she read the first few lines, her brow furrowing, her grip tightening. Then she turned to me, completely unaware that she was speaking to the author. I think I need this, she murmured, almost to herself. I nodded. I think you do too. She smiled, tucking the book under her arm before heading to the checkout counter. I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside me. This wasn't just my story anymore. It belonged to every woman who had ever felt invisible. Then the backlash came. It was inevitable. Men called me bitter, accused me of exaggerating, of profiting off a failed marriage. She's just another woman trying to get revenge, one podcast host sneered. She should have just moved on. I listened to their words, waiting to feel anger, hurt, resentment. But instead I just felt tired. They didn't get it. It was never about him. It was about me. My story wasn't about destroying a man. It was about rebuilding myself. And if they couldn't see that, then they were never meant to understand it in the first place. The day my book hit the bestseller list, my phone buzzed with calls and texts. Friends, family, even people I hadn't spoken to in years reaching out to congratulate me. I ignored most of them. Except one. My mother. She had always been the quiet observer, never one to meddle, never one to push. But now as I answered, I heard something in her voice I hadn't heard in years. Pride. I knew you would find your way, she said softly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I think I finally did. She exhaled. You sound different. I smiled. I feel different. Then came the phone call I didn't expect. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. And the voice on the other end made my stomach drop. Hello. It was her. The woman he had left me for. I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing. Why was she calling me? What did she want? She hesitated before speaking. I know I have no right to reach out to you. But I need to ask you something. I didn't respond, waiting. She took a deep breath. Did he do it to you too? A chill ran down my spine. I knew exactly what she meant. He had left her. For someone else. I should have felt triumphant. Should have felt validated. But all I felt was pity. Because she had believed the same lie I once did. That she was special, that she was the exception. But men like him don't change. They just find new victims. I closed my eyes, exhaling. Yes, I said finally. He did. She let out a shaky breath, like she had been waiting for confirmation, like she had needed to hear it from me to believe it. And I understood. Because once I had needed the same thing. I could have stayed on the phone longer. Could have given her advice, could have told her how to heal. But that wasn't my responsibility. She had to find her own way just like I had. So I simply said, you'll be okay. And then I hung up. That night I stood on my balcony, staring at the city lights, letting the wind carry away the weight of the past. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect woman. But I was done chasing perfection. I was enough just as I was. And my story wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. I stepped back inside my apartment, closing the balcony door behind me, the city lights still twinkling beyond the glass. The conversation with her lingered in my mind, but I pushed it away. That chapter wasn't mine to finish. I had my own story to live. As I made my way to the kitchen, my phone vibrated on the counter. Another call. Another unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Pause. Then a familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in months. Is this how it feels? I stiffened. It was him. The man who had once made me believe I was his world. The man who had tossed me aside for someone he thought was better. And now the man who had been discarded just the same. I didn't speak. I didn't owe him anything. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. To have the whole world talking about you? I exhaled slowly, leaning against the counter. I wouldn't know. They're not talking about me. The silence on his end was deafening. We both knew who they were talking about. The headlines had started appearing just days after my interview went viral. CEO who left wife for younger model gets a taste of his own medicine. Best-selling author's book exposes the ugly truth behind power couples. He left her, and now she's the one everyone wants to be. The internet had been ruthless. Women shared their own stories, using my book as a symbol of resilience. News outlets dissected the parallels between my novel and real-life events. And then, slowly but surely, people started talking about him. His name wasn't in my book. But it didn't have to be. The world had put the pieces together, and suddenly the man who had always been admired for his business acumen, his charm, his untouchable image, was now the subject of brutal scrutiny. At first he had ignored it, pretended it was beneath him. But the internet never forgets. And neither did the people who had watched him trade in his loyal wife for a younger model, only to be replaced himself just months later. Now he was the cautionary tale. And he hated it. You had no right, he said finally, his voice strained. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, steadying my breath. No right to what? To air our lives like that. I let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. You think I did this to you? You wrote the book. I shook my head. I wrote my story. He scoffed. You knew people would connect the dots. I let the silence stretch. He wasn't wrong. But I hadn't written the book for revenge. I had written it to reclaim my voice. If the world had turned against him, it wasn't because of me. It was because he had earned it. He sighed, the weight of his own downfall pressing into the spaces between us. I lost everything. For a second I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered. The nights I had cried myself to sleep while he came home late without an explanation. The way he had humiliated me reduced my dreams to nothing. The cold indifference in his eyes the day he packed his bags and left. And just like that, my sympathy dissolved. I straightened, my grip tightening around the phone. You lost everything the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. His breath hitched just slightly. For the first time I wondered, had he ever thought he would regret it? Had he really believed that walking away from me, from us, was his golden ticket to happiness? Now he had nothing. Not me. Not her. Not the admiration he had always craved. Just the consequences of his own choices. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice lower now, more vulnerable. I let out a slow breath. You don't. Pause. Then softer. What do I do? I blinked at the unexpected question. He was asking me. After everything? I thought for a moment before answering. You live with it, I said simply. And then, before he could say another word, I ended the call. The fallout didn't stop there. The media loved nothing more than a scandal. And his was playing out like a slow-motion car crash. His business partners started distancing themselves. Investors lost confidence. His name became synonymous with arrogance and foolishness. And the whispers started. Maybe he wasn't as brilliant as everyone thought. Maybe he had just been lucky. His empire, one he had built so carefully, one he had chosen over his marriage, was crumbling. And the world watched. I could have felt triumphant. Could have celebrated the way fate had finally evened the scales. But I didn't. Because this wasn't my victory. My victory had happened long before this. It was in the quiet moments when I found myself again. It was in the nights I spent writing, turning my pain into something greater. It was in the readers who found strength in my words. It was in the woman I had become. He had his punishment. But I had my peace. And between the two I knew which one mattered more. A few weeks later I sat at another cafe, my book in hand, flipping through the pages that had changed everything. A woman approached hesitantly. Excuse me, are you the author? I looked up, offering a small smile. Yes. She exhaled, pressing the book to her chest. I just wanted to say, thank you. Your story gave me the courage to leave a relationship that was breaking me. I studied her. She was young, maybe mid-20s, a nervous energy clinging to her. And I saw me in her. The girl I used to be. The one who thought she had to keep proving her worth to a man who never saw it in the first place. I reached out, resting a gentle hand over hers. "You're stronger than you think," I told her. She nodded, her eyes glistening. "So are you." As she walked away, I looked down at my book again. And for the first time since this all began, I felt the final piece settle into place. I had spent years fighting to be enough for someone who never deserved me. Now I knew I had been enough all along. I closed the book gently, running my fingers over the cover one last time. The weight of it in my hands felt different now. Not heavy, not burdensome, just real. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a piece of me, a tangible reminder of everything I had survived, everything I had built. The cafe had emptied out, the hum of conversation fading into a quiet lull. I took a deep breath, savoring the stillness. The girl who had thanked me earlier had left, but her words lingered. "Your story gave me the courage to leave." I thought back to the woman I had been just a year ago, sitting in this very chair, waiting for a husband who never came home on time. A woman who had once measured her worth in the reflection of a man's gaze. She was gone now. And I wasn't mourning her. I picked up my coffee, letting the warmth seep into my palms. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, bright and endless. My world was open now, full of possibilities I hadn't dared to dream of before. And for the first time I allowed myself to wonder, what next? The answer came in the form of a plane ticket. 2 weeks after my book hit the bestseller list, I found myself staring at an email invitation that made my heart race. "We'd love for you to speak at our Women's Empowerment Conference in Paris." Paris, the city of love. The city I had once dreamed of visiting. Back when I had believed love was something that could be given to me, rather than something I could find within myself. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. A year ago I would have asked for permission. I would have worried about schedules, about fitting into someone else's life. But now, I hit accept before I could talk myself out of it. The moment the plane landed, something inside me shifted. Paris was unlike anything I had ever seen. The winding streets, the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air, the effortless charm of the people moving around me. It was intoxicating. I walked along the Seine, my fingers trailing against the cool stone of the bridges, watching lovers whisper secrets to each other beneath the glow of streetlights. And for the first time in my life I didn't feel like I was missing something. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The night of the conference, I stood backstage, my hands gripping the edge of the podium as I took slow, measured breaths. The room beyond the curtain was packed. Women from all over the world had come to listen, to share, to heal. I had spoken in interviews before, had answered endless questions about my book. But this was different. This was real. The host introduced me, and as I stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. I took my place, adjusting the microphone, scanning the faces before me. Then I began. "When I wrote this book," I said, "I wasn't thinking about success. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was just trying to survive." A hush fell over the crowd. I thought my story was just mine. But then I realized, so many of us have lived this story in different ways. We've been told we aren't enough. We've been made to believe that our worth is tied to someone else's love, someone else's validation. I paused, my voice steady. But that's a lie. A woman in the front row wiped at her eyes. We are enough on our own. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is walk away from a love that doesn't love us back. The applause that followed was like a wave, crashing over me, filling the spaces I didn't know were still empty. I had never felt more whole. That night, I walked along the river, the weight of the speech still lingering in my chest. My phone buzzed, and when I pulled it out, I saw another message from him. I didn't read it. I simply deleted it. He was my past. And I wasn't looking back. On my last night in Paris, I sat at a quiet cafe, a glass of wine in front of me, watching the world pass by. A man approached, polite but confident. "May I sit?" I glanced up, studying him. He was handsome, yes, but there was something else. Something I hadn't seen in a man in a long time. Kindness. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Go ahead." He smiled, setting his coffee down. "You look like someone with a story." I laughed softly. "I have a few." He leaned in slightly, curiosity in his eyes. "And do they have happy endings?" I thought for a moment. Then I smiled. "They're still being written." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if love would find me again or if I even wanted it to. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the woman who waited anymore. I wasn't the woman who begged, who compromised herself for someone who saw her as less. I was the woman who walked away. And that was the happiest ending I could have ever asked for. My journey wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about rediscovering my worth, turning pain into power, and proving that success is the best revenge. If you believe in strength after betrayal and the power of self-worth, hit subscribe for more stories that inspire, empower, and remind you that walking away is sometimes the greatest victory.